Hi there, and welcome to Design Tab. My name is Montague Monroe, and today we're going to be digging in a little bit more into AngularJS. If you took the time to watch our last episode of getting started with AngularJS, then you will have learned how to set up AngularJS, as well as some of the functionality and how to do some basic things using the framework. If you have yet to see that video, I highly suggest that you watch that before you get started with this video. There will be a link to the previous video in the description. Alright, so let's get started straight away, and well, basically what we're going to be covering in this tutorial is I wanted to get into stuff like functions, filtering output, events, and loops. They're all pretty standard things, and AngularJS gives some really good tools in order to easily complete things like this. So the first thing we'll do is go into our new project. Now what I've done is I've pre-made a very simple Angular application. You should understand all of this if you watched the previous tutorial. You'll notice we have ng-app set to our app module. We also have our style sheets and scripts linked in. We have the CDN library for Angular. We have our app.js linked in, as well as our controllers. We also have a div with the ng controller of app.ctrl, which is the name of the controller we're using. Inside our style.css we have a very simple one, just a red class which changes the text color to be red. In app.js we have our Angular module initiated under the variable app. We're also injecting no dependencies. And in our controllers, we just have a very simple controller set up called app.ctrl. Takes a function with scope, and if you remember from the last tutorial, scope is the thing that allows our variables to be accessible inside of our HTML. Inside here, I have just a simple array list of items. It should actually be people. We suppose we might as well do that now. People. We have name Tom, name Jerry, and name Bob. So, this is just very, very basic stuff that you would have learned to have set up in the previous tutorial, and I did it beforehand just to cut some time out of our tutorial and focus on the important things. Alright, so before we get started, I wanted to take a quick moment to just move this off, to talk about AngularJS and why it is a good idea to pick it up. I covered a couple of reasons in the last tutorial, but I've been thinking about it. And I find that AngularJS is a good way to future-proof yourself in terms of front-end JavaScript frameworks. It's developed by Google, and they have some amazingly talented devs on there. It's new to a degree, and being actively updated and used, and it will be for quite some time. I personally think it has a very high chance of becoming a big contender for the #1 position in JavaScript frameworks. So by choosing Angular, you are essentially choosing a framework that is more than likely going to be increasing in popularity over time, and it is very unlikely to fall or drop out and become no longer used. So it is a good choice framework to go with. But anyway, enough about how great Angular is. Let's just move straight in and start doing some fun things. Okay, the first thing we want to do is we have our index page here, and we have our people. I want to create an unordered list and loop through every person and print them out. So for this, we're going to be using a really nice directive called ng-repeat. If you've ever used a loop function before, then this should be a little bit familiar to you. Alright, so let's start off by creating an unordered list. And then inside this, we want a list item. And what we're going to do here is use ng-repeat, and we're going to say person in people. And basically what this does is it finds the last thing, people, and it tries to look in our controllers for any scope variables for that name, and it'll find our array. So that's that, and then it's basically saying for each person in there, person can be anything you like. I could even say each human or anything. It's just what we're going to name it, and then we can call it inside of here. So basically saying for every single person in that array, we want to print out, and you guys should remember the handlebars from the previous episode. The handlebars allows you to output Angular data in HTML. And what we're going to do is we're going to say person.name. And what this will do is it'll go through each person and print the name. So let's go to our localhost website and give it a try. So I'm going to refresh the page here, and you'll see we have our unordered list with every person in there. So that's excellent. Let's take this time to add a couple more people to our list. So let's say name Monty, and then maybe one more, just for the sake of it. And we'll say name is Seamus, and one for luck. Name is Rebecca. Alright, so, and if we refresh, you'll see it updates. So we can tell here that it's going through and pulling it out perfectly fine, there's no problems. So this is a very powerful little directive, ng-repeat. It allows you to basically repeat for any number of things in Angular. Whenever you need to use a loop, this is usually your go-to guy. Alright, so let's say we want to add a little bit of functionality to our list here. I want to say, we'll just go for something simple and not exactly practical, but it should give you an idea of how the functions work. Let's go into our Sublime Text, and inside our index.html, we want to add another directive called ng-click. Whoops. And basically what this does is it says, if this element is clicked, then I want to fire off a function inside our controllers. And the function will be turn red. Simple, right? And we add our little brackets in there, just that's where we can pass in variables to be able to work it within our function. We're not going to do that for this one, so we'll just leave it blank. Now it's going to look inside of our app control function, because it's inside that div, inside that scope, and look for this turn red function. So we're going to have to create that inside of our controller. So we'll say scope.turn red is equal to, and we'll say function. There we go, and just don't forget that trailing semicolon. And we are going to say, let's make a variable called is red to true. And then what we're going to want to do is set that false in the beginning, because we want it to always be false unless it's true. So we'll say var, we'll say scope.isRed is equal to false. So what this does is, when the app first starts out, it's going to set isRed to false. If we click this function, or click on any of the list items, it'll fire off turn red function and make isRed true. Pretty simple stuff. Now we're going to want it to actually do something noticeable. And the way I figured to do this, just to sort of show how it works, is using another Angular directive called ng-class. Now what ng-class does is it basically says, if a certain thing is met, like for instance if isRed is equal to true, then apply a class to the list item. So what we're going to do is we're going to say red, and then we'll say if isRed is equal to true. So it's going to say if isRed is equal to true, apply the red class, and you'll see here that'll just change the color of the text to red. So let's give it a shot here. If we run into any errors, I'll keep on recording so that basically if there's any problems I can show you how to fix it. So now if we click on any of these, oh nope, we're not getting anything here, so there's something wrong in our code. So let's have a look through our code and see what we can do. So we've got ng-class red, if isRed is equal to true. And when it's clicked, we want it to turn red. So isRed should be equal to false. The problem here is we need to actually do scope.isRed is equal to true. Because remember, they're only accessible if it has scope. So if we do that and refresh the page, we might be in luck. So if I click on one of these, you'll see it changes all the text to red. And this is basic use of functions and the event system in Angular. Just one more time I'll go through it just to really sink it in. So we have a bunch of list items that are repeating using ngRepeat. Each one has a click function, basically saying if you click me, I'm going to fire off this. So it hits here and says, boom, turn red. So it jumps over to our controller and says, okay, red is false. Because it's clicked, I'm going to turn it true. And then back here, it says this ng class says, if red is equal to true, apply the red class. And as you can see, that's basically what it's doing. You can just click it, and it goes red. Okay, so that's fairly simple stuff, and I hope you understand it. So let's move along to something like, let's filter this output. What we want to do is we want to have a text box at the top, and when we type into the text box, we basically want to filter out these names to find the one we want. So let's start off by adding an input type of text, and we'll say ng model, and you guys should remember this from the previous tutorial if you watched it. Ng model to set, say, a local variable, a scope variable, and we'll say text input. So that's pretty simple there. Now, in order for this, we just basically want to add a filter. We want to say we only want to show stuff that have text from text input in there. And to do that, we add a pipe, which basically says we want to add some kind of filter or something else that I'll go into a little bit later. But and we'll say filter, double colon, and then we use our model, which will be text input. Basically, this is saying filter out all of the people by the text input. So let's refresh the page, and you'll see if I go TOM, and it will actively whittle down the list until we only have what we want. So MON. So if I type an N, you'll see it'll show up everything with an M in it. And then if I type an O, it'll show up something that has an M and an O in it. Pretty simple stuff, but very powerful. It allows you to easily and nicely be able to sift through your information and find what you're looking for. Alrighty, so this is the main things I wanted to show for this tutorial. Basically, what we did was we learnt about using ngRepeat to loop through objects. This is used a lot, and it's very, very handy. We learnt about click functions, which are also great. It allows us to fire off any function we like when clicking an element. We've learnt about adding dynamic classes dependent on what we put in here. So we basically say, you know, if isRed is true, we could put whatever we like in here as long as it eventually evaluates to true or false, or you know, as long as it equates to what it should be, and it'll apply the class, which is very handy. And finally, we've learned to filter our data using filters. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you like Angular, I do suggest checking out the AngularJS website and docs. They have a lot of very, very important and good information on there. Eggheads.io also has some amazing bite-sized tutorials, about 2.5 minutes each, that cover very, very specific things. And then finally, I also would like to recommend checking out NetTuts Plus. They have a couple of really very good tutorials, particularly for beginners, where they go through everything for AngularJS and sort of teach you some really nice stuff. Anyway guys, if you are interested in learning more about web design or graphic design, feel free to come over and check designtab.me. We're a fairly new website, but we are adding more content as fast as we can, and if you're interested in this kind of stuff, come over and say hi.